And yes, change is a future where we reduce our deficit, but we do it in a balanced, responsible way. You know, I've signed $1 trillion worth of spending cuts, gotten rid of programs that aren't working. I intend to do more, but if we're serious about the deficit, we can't just cut our way to prosperity. We've also got to ask the wealthiest Americans to go back to the tax rates they paid when Bill Clinton was in office. And by the way, we can afford it. I haven't talked to Bruce, but I know he can afford it. I can afford it. Mr. Romney, he can afford it. Because our budget reflects our values. It's a reflection of our priorities. You know, and as long as I'm president, I'm not going to kick some poor kids off a Head Start to give me a tax cut. I'm not going to turn Medicare into a voucher just to pay for another millionaire's tax cut. So Wisconsin, we know what change is. We know what the future requires, but we also know it's not going to be easy. Now, back in 2008, we talked about it. I know everybody sometimes romanticizes the last campaign, the posters, you know, all the good feeling, but I said back then, and when I talk about change, I'm not just talking about changing presidents or political parties, I'm talking about changing how our politics works. I ran because the voices of the American people, your voices, had been shut out of our democracy for way too long by lobbyists and special interests and politicians who will say and do anything just to keep things the way they are, to protect the status quo. The status quo in Washington is fierce, and over the last 4 years, that status quo has fought us every step of the way. They spent millions trying to stop us from reforming the healthcare system. Spent millions trying to prevent us from reforming Wall Street. They engineered a strategy of gridlock in Congress, refusing to compromise on ideas that both Democrats and Republicans had agreed to the past. And what they're counting on now is that you're going to be so worn down, so fed up, so tired of all the squabbling, so tired of all the dysfunction, that you're just going to give up and walk away and leave them right where they are, pulling the strings, pulling the levers, and you locked out of the decisions that impact your lives. In other words, their bet is on cynicism. But Wisconsin, my bet's on you. My bet's on you. And understand, I'm not making a partisan point here when the other party's been willing to work with me to cut middle-class taxes for families and small businesses, or some courageous Republican senators crossing the aisle to support the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I'm thrilled, because we're not Democrats or Republicans first, we're Americans first. As long as I'm president, I'll work with anybody of any party to move this country forward. And if you want to break the gridlock in Congress, you'll vote for leaders like Tammy Baldwin, or Republicans or independents who feel the same way, who put you first, not the next election first. But you know what? Sometimes you got to fight. Sometimes you got to stand on principle. If the price of peace in Washington is cutting deals to cut students off of financial aid, or get rid of funding for Planned Parenthood, or let insurance companies discriminate against people with pre-existing conditions, or eliminate health care for millions of folks who are on Medicaid, who are poor, or elderly, or disabled, I won't pay that price. That's not a deal I'll take. That's not bipartisanship, that's not change. That's surrender. Let's surrender to the same status quo that's been squeezing middle-class families for way too long. That's not why I ran for president, to leave things the way they are. I'm not ready to give up on that fight. I'm not ready to give up on that fight, Wisconsin, and I hope you aren't either. Now, the folks at the very top in this country, they don't need another champion in Washington. They'll always have a seat at the table. They'll always have access. They'll always have influence. That's the nature of things. The people who need a champion are the Americans whose letters I read late at night after a long day in the office. The men and women I meet on the campaign trail every day. You know, the laid-off worker who's going back to community college to retrain at the age of 55 for a new career, she needs a champion. The restaurant owner who's got great food but needs a loan to expand after the bank turned him down, he needs a champion. The cooks and the waiters and the cleaning staff at a Madison hotel trying to save enough to buy a first home or send their kid to college, they need a champion. The auto worker who never thought he'd see the line again and now's back on the job filled with pride and dignity because it's not just building a great car, it's not just about a paycheck, it's about taking pride in what you do. He needs a champion.
Yes!
A teacher in an overcrowded classroom with old, outdated textbooks, digging into her own pocket to buy school supplies, frustrated sometimes, not getting the support she needs, but knowing every single day she might make a difference in that one child's life, and that makes it all worth it. She needs a champion.
Yeah!
All those kids in inner cities and small farm towns, in the valleys of Ohio, the rolling Virginia hills, or in the streets of Madison, kids dreaming of becoming scientists or doctors or engineers or entrepreneurs, diplomats, maybe even a president. They need a champion. They don't have lobbyists. The future never has as many lobbyists as the status quo, but it is the dreams of those children that will be our saving grace. That's what will propel us forward. That's what will make America continue to be this shining light on a hill. And that's why I need you, Wisconsin, to make sure the voices of those children are heard, to make sure your voices are heard. We have come too far to turn back now. We've come too far to let our hearts grow faint. Now's the time to keep pushing forward, to educate all our kids and train all our workers, create new jobs, bring our troops home, care for our veterans, broaden opportunity, grow our middle class, restore our democracy, and make sure that no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter how you started out, no matter what your last name is, you can make it here in America if you try. That's why I need your vote. And if you're willing to work with me again and knock on some doors with me, make some phone calls for me, turn out for me, we'll win Wisconsin.